Chapter 6, The Principles of Pranic Healing. Before we can understand pranic healing, we must understand something about prana. Prana is the name given by the yogi philosophers to vital force, or energy, which is found within the body of every living thing. It may be called the life force. At the last, prana is known to be mental in its nature, and is the energy of the mind of the universe. But in order to avoid metaphysical distinctions in this book, let us follow the usual custom of treating prana as an independent thing, just as we do mind and matter. The yogis teach that prana is a universal principle, as something pervading all space, and together with mind and matter composing the threefold manifestation of the Absolute. Leaving aside the manifestations of prana in the forms of force, known as electricity, heat, light, etc., let us consider it in its manifestation of vital force, which is the only aspect with which we are concerned in this book. Prana is the force by which all activity is carried on in the body, by which all bodily movements are possible, by which all functioning is done, by which all signs of life manifest themselves. We have described prana at considerable length in our other books, and do not desire to repeat ourselves, and to take up space in such repetitions, any more than can be avoided. Briefly, however, we may say that prana is that principle of life which is found in the air, water, food, etc., from which the living organism absorbs it to use in the work of the body. We advise all students of this book to read either The Science of Breath, or else Hatha Yoga, in order to gain a fuller idea of the subject of prana. In the books named, we have given many exercises whereby prana may be stored up and acquired, and also how it may be used. The general principles of pranic healing rests on the fact that prana may be transferred or transmitted from one person to another, in many ways. The usual method, and the most effective, is to use the hands and make passes over the sick person, and at the same time directing a current of prana to the affected part, thereby stimulating and stirring into activity the sluggish cell groups. The prana so transferred acts as a bracing tonic to the patient, and invigorates and strengthens him wonderfully, besides tending to produce the local improvement just noted. Prana may also be sent to the patient in the shape of energized thought, directed from the mind of the healer. This fact has not generally been brought out in works on the subject, but we shall pay much attention to it in our consideration of pranic healing, in our next chapter. In fact, very wonderful healing work may be performed by those methods alone, without reference to the other phases of healing. The student will notice that we are not tarrying long to discuss theories. This is done purposely, for we wish to make this book a book of practical facts and instruction, and the majority of the theories will be familiar to those who have read our other books, which, although not devoted to the subject of healing, nevertheless, touch upon the general theories underlying all psychic phenomena. Healing of the sick by means of laying on of hands has been known from the earliest days of the race. As far back in history as we are able to go, we may find trace of this practice. And, it is only fair to surmise that before the days of written history, the custom was likewise prevalent. It is found among all races of people today, even among the savage races. It seems to have arisen from an instinctive conviction in the mind of man, that healing lay in that direction. The Indians, the Egyptians, the Jews, the Chinese, of ancient days, were perfectly familiar with this form of healing. In Egypt, the ancient carvings in the rocks show healers treating patients by placing one hand on the stomach, and the other on the back. And the early explorers of China report that similar practices were common there. The Old Testament is full of instances of this form of healing. And we also find cases mentioned in the New Testament. St. Patrick is reported to have healed the blind in Ireland, by placing his hands upon their eyes. St. Bernard is reported as having cured 11 blind people, and to have enabled 18 lame persons to regain the use of the limbs, all in one day. And in Cologne he is reported to have cured 12 lame people, also 3 dumb persons, and 10 deaf ones, all by means of the laying on of hands. The history of the early church is full of instances of this sort, and making allowance for the romantic tales that always arise in such cases, we may see that much good and effective work was done by these people, in this way. Pyrrhus, the king of Epirus, is reported by history to have had the power of curing colic and diseases of the spleen, by touching the persons affected. The Emperor Vespasian is said to have cured nervous diseases, and lameness, blindness, etc., by laying on of hands. Hadrian cured people having dropsical diseases, by applying the points of his fingers to them. King Olaf healed instantaneously by laying his hands upon the sufferer. The early kings of England and France healed goiter and throat affections by the king's touch. In England there was a disease called the king's evil, which was thought to be curable only by the touch of the king. The courts of Habsburg were believed to be able to cure stammering by a kiss. Pliny reports that in the ancient days there were men who cured the bites of serpents by the touch. Numerous religious celebrities cured disease by the laying on of hands. In England, Greatorex created quite a sensation, and invited persecution. By going about curing all sorts of diseases in this way, his success in curing diseases that had been thought to be curable by the king's touch caused many to regard him as a pretender to the throne. In the 17th century, a gardener named Leverett performed wonderful cures in the streets of London, by stroking the afflicted with his fingers. In 1817, a Cilician innkeeper named Richter cured thousands of people by applying his hands to them. So you see, the fact of pranic healing has made itself apparent in all ages and among all people, and those having sufficient confidence in themselves to perform cures, were looked upon as specially gifted persons. But the fact is that the gift is one common to the race, and may be manifested by anyone who has sufficient confidence in himself to try it, and who has sufficient earnestness to throw his heart into the work. The old yogi teachers of over 25 centuries ago had reduced this form of healing to a science, and traces of their knowledge filtered out to all parts of the world. The Egyptians obtained their knowledge from the great yogi teachers, and established schools of their own. The Greeks obtained a similar knowledge from India and Egypt, and the Hebrews and Assyrians are believed to have obtained theirs through Egyptian channels. The early Greek physicians performed their principal cures by the laying on of hands, and manipulation of the affected parts of the body. With them the healing process was something belonging to the orders of the priesthood, and the general public were not allowed to participate in its mysteries. Hippocrates has written, "The affections suffered by the body, the soul sees quite well with shut eyes." Wise physicians, even among the ancients, were aware how beneficial to the blood is to make slight frictions with the hands over the body. It is believed by many experienced doctors that the heat which oozes out of the hand, on being applied to the sick, is highly salutary and assuaging. The remedy has been found to be applicable to sudden as well as habitual pains, and various species of debility, being both renovating and strengthening in its effects. It has often appeared, while I have thus been soothing my patients, as if there were a singular property in my hands to pull and draw away from the affected parts aches and diverse impurities, by laying my hand upon the place, and by extending my fingers toward it. Thus it is known to some of the learned that health may be implanted in the sick by certain gestures, and by contact, as some diseases may be communicated from one to another. Aesculapius treated diseases by breathing on the affected parts, and by stroking them with his hands. The ancient Druids, that is the priesthood, performed cures in this way, the same being made a part of their religious ceremonies and rites. Tacitus, Vopiscus, and Lampridius, report these things of the Druids, and give wonderful testimony regarding their gifts. The records of the Middle Ages are filled with similar accounts of wonderful cures accomplished by the laying on of the hands, the churches being the usual scene of the cures. Van Helmont, who lived about the first part of the 17th century, seemed to be acquainted with the principles of pranic healing, for he writes, "Magnetism is active everywhere, and there is nothing new in it but the name. It is a paradox only to those who ridicule everything, and to attribute to the power of Satan whatever they are unable to explain." About the same time, a Scotchman named Maxwell, taught similar methods of healing. He believed in a vital spirit pervading the universe, which man could draw upon in order to cure diseases. In 1734, Father Hell, a priest, taught the existence of an universal fluid, which might be used to cure diseases. He made many wonderful cures, but was driven out of the church for possessing the power of the devil, and using witchcraft. Mesmer taught the theory of animal magnetism, and accomplished cures by its aid, always using his hands in applying it. Mesmer left many followers and disciples, many of whom gained great prominence, the Marquis of Pussiger being one of these. In Germany Mesmer's doctrines, and those that grew of them, gained great popularity and prominence. Brayman was a great sinner of the animal magnetism doctrine, and from there it spread all over Germany. The Prussian government took a great interest in the matter, and established a hospital for the cure of diseases by magnetic treatment. Various continental governments passed rigid laws keeping the magnetic treatments in the hands of the medical fraternity. And, so from country to country, the new doctrines spread. Often repressed by governmental interference, urged on by medical opposition, it still flourishes in various forms, and under different theories. During the past 10 years it has gained great prominence in America and Great Britain, both from the various schools of magnetic healing, as well as from the tremendous growth of the New Thought movement. Many theories have been evolved to account for it, ranging from purely material ones to religious conceptions. But, notwithstanding the theories, the work went on, and cures were accomplished. The laying on of hands played a prominent part. 1. Nearly all these forms of healings, in spite of their theories or names of their schools, many people still believe that this form of healing is some sort of special gift, inherent in, and bestowed upon certain individuals. But this is not so, for the gift of healing is inherent in each person, although some attain more proficiency than others, by reason of their peculiar temperamental adaptability for the work, and all may cultivate and develop this gift. We do not care to devote a great deal of space to the theory underlying pranic healing, for all the various forms of healing by the laying on of hands, really comes under this head, in spite of conflicting theories and names. But we may as well briefly run over the fundamental ideas underlying the subject. Perhaps the better way would be to identify the word prana, with that which we recognize as vital force. So we will use the word vital force, in this chapter, in our work of explaining the nature of prana. Vital force is that which underlies all physical action of the body. It is that which causes the circulation of the blood, the movements of the cells, in fact all the motions upon which depend the life of the physical body. Without this vital force, there could be no life, no motion, no action. Some call it nervous force, but it is the one thing, no matter by what name it may be called. It is this force that is sent forth from the nervous system by an effort of the will, when we wish a muscle to move, and it is this force which causes that muscle to move. It is not necessary to go into a discussion of the real nature and essence of this vital force, for that would carry us far into other phases of the subject. Enough for our purpose is the fact that it really exists, and may be used in the healing of disease. The electrician, even the most advanced men of that science, know nothing of the real nature of electricity, and yet they are able to make wonderful use of it, and to understand its laws of operation. And so it is with this matter of vital force, for to understand its real nature and origin, one would need to know the real nature and origin of the universe. But, man may, and does, use this force every moment of his life, and may turn it to account in other ways, such as the healing of the sick. Man absorbs his supply of vital force from the food he eats, the water he drinks, and largely from the air he breathes. He also has a mental source of energy, whereby he draws to himself energy from the great reservoirs of energy, of the universal mind. In our book Science of Breath and Hatha Yoga, we have gone into this matter at greater length, and all students of psychic healing should acquaint themselves with those books, if they have not done so already. This vital energy is stored up in the brain, and great nerve centers of the body, from which it is drawn to supply the constantly arising wants of the system. It is distributed over the wires of the nervous system, to all parts of the body. In fact, every nerve is constantly charged with vital force, which is replenished when exhausted. Every nerve is a live wire, through which the flow of vital force proceeds. And, more than this, every cell in the body, no matter where it is located, or what work it is doing, contains more or less vital energy, at all times. A strong, healthy person is one who is charged with a goodly supply of vital force, which travels to all parts of the body, refreshing, stimulating, and producing activity and energy. Not only does it do this, but it surrounds his body like an aura, and may be felt by those coming in contact. A person depleted of vital force will manifest ill health, lack of vitality, etc., and will only regain his normal condition when he replenishes his store of vitality. While the medical fraternity are quite free to express their belief in the existence of vital force, although they differ in their theories regarding the nature of the same, they insist that it cannot be transferred beyond the limits of the nervous system of the person producing or manifesting it. But this is contradicted by the actual experiences of thousands of people who know that vital force, prana, or magnetism, call it what you will, may be, and has been transmitted to the body of a third person, who is thereby strengthened and invigorated by reason thereof. Many of the advocates and practitioners of this form of healing have caused a confusion in the public mind by calling it magnetism, or magnetic healing, etc. There is nothing magnetic about this vital force, for it arises from an entirely different cause, although, to be sure, all forms of force or energy arise from the same primal cause. Vital force is something which plays its own part 1. The economy of nature, and that part 1. Entirely different from that played by magnetism. It is something different from anything else, and can be compared only with itself. All persons have more or less vital force, and all persons have the power of increasing their store, and of transmitting it to others, and thereby curing disease. In other words, all persons are potential healers. There has been much talk about persons being gifted in this form of healing, but the fact is that all persons have the gift, and may develop it by confidence and practice. And this development is the purpose of this part of the book. The principles of pranic healing is the filling of the cells of the affected part with a fresh and full supply of vital force or prana, whereby the cells are enabled to regain normal powers of functioning and work, the consequence being that when the cells work properly, the organ recovers its former activity, and the entire system regains health, and health, after all, is merely normal functioning.